I'm unsure if this story will capture anyone's interest, as confessions like these often make people believe that such things happen to others, but not to themselves. That's exactly what I used to think, until a certain point. My experience reflects the norms of our time when faithfulness is no longer regarded as a virtue, but rather as a mere joke. I entered into marriage quite early, at the tender age of 19, during my third year of college. My wife is a year younger than me, a typical age arrangement for starting a family. In our first year together, we were blessed with the birth of our son, and 8 years later, our daughter came into our lives. Upon completing my education, I enlisted in the Army, which provided a decent salary, enabling my wife to focus on raising our children instead of pursuing a career. I spent considerable time both in our country and abroad. As a result, I was awarded a couple of medals and, unfortunately, sustained a shrapnel injury in my back. Eventually, at the age of 42, I was honorably discharged from service. Following my departure from the military, I immediately returned to my original profession at a prominent metallurgical company. 5 years later, I rose to the position of Deputy General Director and co-owner. Money was never a concern for me, and that remains true to this day. Now, at 60 years old, my wife is 59. We have been married for 41 years at the time of the events I'm about to share. Throughout our marriage, I never had a reason to doubt my wife's faithfulness, nor did any suspicion ever cross my mind. Our children have grown up and pursued careers in law enforcement. My son has become a colonel, heading a department, while my daughter serves as a warrant officer. They both have families of their own, and we are blessed with grandchildren. Our lives seemed content, or at least that's what I believed. I never once raised my voice at my wife, and she was never denied anything she desired. I took great joy in showering her with gifts, for I truly loved her. Intimacy was never an issue between us, and we shared a fulfilling connection. My wife has defied the passage of time, maintaining and even enhancing her natural beauty, all without relying on the tricks of cosmetologists. I must admit it's a delightful feeling to have such an attractive woman by my side. As it turns out, I'm not the only one who thinks so. Natasha, that's my wife's name, has been working at a pharmaceutical company for the past 15 years as the head of the marketing department. Her job often required extensive travel, especially in the last 5 years. Some of her business trips would last for months, as she diligently managed the supply of drugs to pharmacies, particularly in the bustling cities of Siberia. Krasnoyarsk was a place she frequented. Despite being away on these trips, Natasha never failed to call me almost every day, expressing how much she missed me and the children. Coincidentally, our metallurgical company recently secured a contract with our colleagues in Krasnoyarsk for supplying welded pipes for an oil pipeline. As the Deputy General Director, it was my responsibility to travel there and finalize the deal. It was during this visit that everything unfolded. After signing the contract, we proceeded to the office of their General Director. As is customary on such occasions, a table was set with beverages and light refreshments. On the CEO's desk, I noticed a few photographs. One of them caught my eye, leaving me breathless. It was a picture of the office owner alongside a stunning red-haired woman whom I immediately recognized as my wife Natasha. To say that my mind went blank would be an understatement. Summoning immense strength, I composed myself and nonchalantly inquired about the person in the photograph. The General Director proudly explained that she was his beloved companion, with whom he had been together for 4 years. He even suggested continuing the celebration at his country estate, where he promised to introduce me to his live-in partner. Along the way, he spoke highly of her, praising her domestic skills. However, he mentioned one drawback. She often had to tend to her ailing mother, necessitating extended absences. Nevertheless, he remained hopeful that their relationship would endure and that they could be together. As I listened to his revelations, my heart raced, pounding against the walls of my throat. Fear gripped me, threatening to overwhelm my senses, and a dark impulse briefly crossed my mind. But I knew deep down that he was innocent. We arrived at an immaculate mansion, and its owner graciously invited me inside, concerned about the redness on my face. Struggling to find my voice, I muttered that I wasn't feeling well, Stepping into the dining room, he proudly introduced me to his wife, Natasha. The moment her eyes met mine, Natasha froze her. Her breath caught and her face drained of color as she slowly crumpled to the floor. Her friend hurriedly caught her, preventing her collapse. Realizing the danger I posed, I knew I had to leave immediately, or else I might harm them both. Without uttering a word, I swiftly turned on my heels and fled from the mansion. Spotting a passing cab, I hailed it just in time. Hastily gathering my belongings from the hotel, I rushed to the airport, exerting every ounce of effort to secure a ticket for the next available flight. Only as I sat on the plane did my racing mind begin to regain some semblance of composure. Throughout the journey, a single question pulsated in my head, echoing the beat of my own heart. Why would she do this to me? The details of my return home remain hazy, lost in a fog of bewilderment. I paced my apartment restlessly, traversing every corner, repeating the haunting question, why? Unable to find solace in sitting or lying down, my legs swelled from the ceaseless agitation. My heart, once pounding, now rumbled ominously, intermittently descending into an abyss. Then, a sudden and excruciating pain gripped my chest, and consciousness slipped away from me. It was my driver who discovered me, having grown concerned when I failed to appear at the designated time for my commute to work. Unlocking the apartment with his spare key, he found me unconscious on the floor and immediately summoned an ambulance. Thankfully, the medical intervention proved successful, and my heart's irregular rhythm was attributed to the strain of overwhelming emotions causing the severe chest pain. I spent approximately 3 weeks in the hospital, during which Natasha made several attempts to reach me. However, I chose not to answer her calls, eventually turning off my phone altogether. Upon arriving home, I switched on my phone and immediately received a call. It was Natasha on the line, babbling incoherently as she attempted to explain something, pleading for forgiveness, while also trying to accuse me of wrongdoing. The conversation concluded with her screaming that she and our children meant everything to her, that her love was solely for me, and she begged for my forgiveness. I listened to her until the end, but in silence, I disconnected the call. I couldn't bear it any longer. For 4 years, my wife had led a double life, weaving a web of lies and deceit, all while fearing discovery. Despite her apparent love for me and her involvement with a prominent figure in the oil industry, she had maintained a parallel existence. Was I merely kept as a backup plan? Throughout this time, our children had been searching for answers, but I was afraid and ashamed to reveal the whole truth, though I knew it was inevitable. A month later, Natasha returned, still hopeful that she could somehow persuade me to forgive her. After listening to her for about an hour, I called our son and daughter. As they arrived, I proposed that Natasha should tell them herself. The children sat in silence, attentively listening to her disjointed speech. Her explanation boiled down to me not giving her enough attention, failing to see her as a woman, which led her to find love elsewhere, claiming it was stronger than her loyalty to our family. However, she professed her deep love for us and begged for our forgiveness. Our son was the first to respond. "Mother, what you did was a cruel thing to both us and Dad. It's up to him to decide, but I can't forgive you." Our daughter stood there silently, tears streaming down her face. Without uttering a word, she left the room. Natasha understood the gravity of the situation. Her demeanor suddenly grew somber, her shoulders slumped, and without glancing at me, she left the apartment. I walked over to the window, watching as my wife descended the stairs and entered a waiting taxi. She returned to her lover in Crest-Noyers. 6 months later, she reappeared, having lost her new husband in a car accident, and his children promptly evicted her from their estate. Left with no other options, she returned to our city. She attempted to see me on several occasions, but I refused to engage in conversation. The children also ignored her calls. Currently, she resides in her parents' apartment and works at a pharmacy. I remain unaware of her personal life. Cheating Secrets podcast like me.